From 250 naira in 1991 to 5,500 in 2000, 18,900 in 2011, and 30,000 naira since 2019 to an undetermined figure for now. The increment in minimum wage has been constantly adjusted over the past decades to accommodate Nigerians in their ever-changing economy. Now, after months of discussions and a two-day strike that has been suspended for a week now, the Nigerian federal government and the labor unions are on the verge of agreeing to a new minimum wage. News Central's Bernard Akedi, of course, who's my co-host, captures the moment in the industrial action when it was called off in this report.
It's day 2 of the indefinite strike embarked upon by NLC and TUC. Though there were talks about shutting down activities at the international airport in Lagos, it seemed business was going on as usual. To my left here are a group of pilgrims who are waiting for their flight. The private pilgrims are fearing that the strike may affect their travel plans, but they've been here as early as 7 a.m. just so that if anything goes wrong, they will still have the chance to take off.
So when you bata wọlé àwọn elétò ní ká ní sùúrù díẹ̀. So aláti wá sọ́dọ̀ àwọn èèyàn wa tó sìn wá ká wá ṣe àìsí wọn gbà tí àsìkò tá fẹ́ lọ ò tí tó. Ṣùgbọ́n àwọn elétò ní ká ní sùúrù díẹ̀. So la ní ká wá kí àwọn tó sìn wá ká wá ṣe àìsí wọn níta.
While passengers and workers at the international airport remained hopeful that the situation would not degenerate, the same could not be said of the domestic airport. Unionists here could be seen dancing to music while waving union flags, while the airport's gates remained chained just as it was the day before. Intermittently, information from the ongoing meeting in Abuja was disseminated over the public address system.
The NLC TUC meeting.
And then, just about 20 minutes before noon, the information of the suspension of the strike was announced, and amidst cheers, the gates of the domestic airport, MM2, were reopened.
So what we have done is to suspend the strike for another 1 week because the government has said that in the next 1 week from today, they will be discussing with us on a daily basis. So we hope that in the next 1 week, both the government and the union should be able to come up with something reasonable.
The union members then made their way to the old domestic airport and reopened the gates there too. As for passengers, it was mixed feelings. While they could now heave a sigh of relief, there was also the part of frustration caused by the suspension of airport activities.
I was meant to fly 6 a.m. I have a meeting in Abuja for today. I don't know. We're waiting for the pilots. We're waiting for Labour Congress. We're waiting for Nigeria to do the right thing.
I received an instruction from them, an alert instruction from them, that by 1 o'clock the flight will still move. But unfortunately, they are telling me now that the thing has been shifted to Thursday. I came all the way from Ibadan.
And with the announcement of the strike suspension, the gates of the airports have been thrown open. Passengers can once again fly across the country. However, the unionists say that this is not the end. The strike has only been suspended and has not been called off. They, however, are optimistic both the union and the government will be able to come to favorable agreements that will be for the betterment of all Nigerians. In Lagos for News Central, I'm Bernard Akedi. I can't even lie, covering this particular strike action for 2 days was quite a hectic one, especially visiting the airport. I mean, you could see people stranded at the airport. It was just mixed feelings. While some people were there with their luggage, hoping to fly, there were others dancing Bob Marley, and that was the union members. It was mixed feelings, right? Yeah. I felt sorry for travelers and people who were affected. But, you know, several News Central correspondents, different, most of us covered it across the country. And now we're going to be joined by Chinwe Ugeli, who covered this from Abia State, I believe. Chinwe, thank you for joining us.
All right. While we're waiting to establish a connection with Chinwe, I think that if there's something that I've noticed for a long time is this is the first time that Nigerians were, I don't know if I would say 100% supportive of the actions of, the labor unions, but for the first time, they were not like reluctant in the sense that they were not complaining. I remember, was it last year when you went to the airport and then Nigerians were agitated, like, we want to travel, let us try. I don't know what's happening here. It's not my business. But this time around, there was a little bit of support from Nigerians.
Yeah, there was some support because I think at this point, every Nigerian, regardless of who you voted for, has been feeling the pinch of,
I think people are annoyed about that. Regardless of who you voted
Regardless of, you know, because like we say in Nigeria, everybody is collecting woto.
Yeah.
Everybody has felt it in one way or the other, right? You know, the economy is not exactly fantastic at the moment. You don't have to study economics to understand what inflation is right now. You see it every day. You go to the market, buy something today, tomorrow the price goes up, and the day after that, it's a different price, you know. And of course, this has affected every and anything. It's even worse for things that are being imported into the country because of the undulating, you know, price of foreign exchange. And then power hasn't been fantastic, you know, healthcare hasn't. It's almost like in the past 1 year, nothing exactly had worked. And so when Labour decided that we also want to demand better pay, I think, again, I don't want to... Everybody's being careful about comparing anything to the NSAS protest. Yeah. But then it's like this strike or this protest for minimum wage increment was just, will I say, it was a portal to requesting for other things, right? So yes, the basic picture was minimum wage, but there's so many other things tied to the minimum wage protest. I hope that we do get Chinwe online so that she can give us an experience or her own experience as she covered it in Abia State. But in Lagos, I can tell you quite clearly that I think the first place I visited was Alausa Secretariat, which is just a few kilometers away from here. And usually you would have, you know, swarms of people, workers in that premises. On that day, they still came, you know, to work. Somebody was saying that they're doing Ojuayi. You know what that means? Eye service. Yeah. Right? But the federal union members came and blocked off the gates with their buses, locked the complex, ensuring that nobody goes in. I remember I saw, you know, a supervisor trying to make her way in, and they turned her back.
So my thing is, I mean, it's applaudable to see that these unions are taking action. But then again, you know, borrowing the words of one of my colleagues, you say that it's just a charade, like we're putting up a facade in some sort, because there is a topsy-turvy nature in the union's actions. You know, you come up today, oh, nobody's working, blah, blah, blah. And then before you know it, I mean, this one was even more, would I say, transparent. Before now, we'd hear things like, oh, there was a closed door meeting. When would they open the door? And then this time around, we're hearing that, okay, the government agreed to increase it over 60, so it can be 60,200 as long as there's an increment.
60,001.
So very, very vague agreements just make us, and it looks as though it's very predictable, right? No matter the action, just give them something to hold on to. Even if it's not happening, okay, we promise, and then before you know, everything is dissolved. But anyways, let's try and see if we can establish connection with Chinwe.
Okay, Chinwe, are you there? Can you hear us now?
Okay, we're hoping that I really hope that we can have Chinwe join us, because I really want to know what she thinks. But I've heard people say that, okay, so there's so many disparities, right? First off, a lot of people are saying that it's ridiculous the amount of money they're asking for a minimum wage. And to be honest, this is me playing the devil's advocate. How feasible is over 400,000 naira in minimum wage? The minimum wage means that even the cleaners in your house...
Exactly, that's the barest minimum, right, that any worker can receive.
How much is my salary?
How much is my own salary? And
you know, when I heard that, I said that myself and my driver will be taking turns on this show because you cannot be doing that work and you be getting... But really, that's the reality.
I totally understand, you know, and, you know, the basic economic principles, economic calculations, economic understandings that people need to understand first and to know before we join this clamor for minimum wage at certain amounts of money. And, you know, people who are economists in the House have actually come out to say that we should be careful with what we demand for so that we don't cause further inflation in the country. You know, remember again that we're talking about minimum wage. So from my basic understanding, if we raise the minimum wage to that particular amount of money, which, okay, let's say, the person at the lowest point of the cadre, like you stated, the janitors, the drivers, the unskilled laborers, basically, earn as high as 450,000 naira. The next level will definitely earn higher than that.
We'll have to,
and the level after that. So eventually, we are almost building up on what we are trying to fight against. We're trying to stop, you know, top government officials from going home with so much money while those at the bottom are going home with such little money. But if we raise the amount to so high, it means that when it gets to them as well at the top, their own take-home will have to also shoot up, as a matter of fact. And then, like you clearly stated, it will affect the private sector as well, because the private sector, and now, here's a basic analogy. So you run an eatery, minimum wage for your workers is 450,000. It's still laughable, I'm sorry. So you pay one of the ladies or the guys who serve or who opens, or the doorman, 450,000 naira. You can only make money to pay your staff when you sell your products. So say I run an eatery, I sell food and I sell confectionaries, donuts, cakes, biscuits. and I have to pay my staff the least 450,000 naira, where do you think I'll get the money from? It means I have to get it from my cost of sales. So how much will one donut now cost?
And then people will still have to buy, and then
you will still have
back.
to buy.
So it's like a vicious circle.
Exactly.
And like you said, I think that Nigerians need to understand that there is an economic implication to that, right? It's not just, oh, pay us 400 and everybody. And there's this hope that it gives people like, oh, so you mean I can get 400 or something? But honestly, it's not feasible. Although people would also argue that it's more like a, bargaining chip in the sense that, okay, we can't just come and say we want 100K, then they'll beat it down to 60. So let's start from something. So I feel like these unions know, right? They know that probably what they're asking for is a little too much, but they're believing that maybe the government can meet them in the middle, which is something we still have to debate about. But I mean, at least it can increase a little bit. So, but then again, we need to be more realistic about what we're demanding.
We definitely need. Now, there's I think this particular time, there was one plus that I'd like to take away from this strike action. Now, several times we've seen when unions go on strike or certain groups go on strike, and I'm talking particularly now the medical sector, because I know that the medical sector was also affected. In the course of my report on day one, I visited Lagos University Teaching Hospital last week here in Ikeja, and one major question people always ask is, what's going to happen to the sick people, particularly those in emergency wards? And we've seen cases where, because of strike actions, people have lost their lives. But this time, they were quite, will I say, magnanimous is not the word, but we're considerate, I think, and decided that the emergency wards will continue to run as they should, which was fantastic, you know, in my opinion. But they ensured that other parts of the hospital have to, you know, comply to the strike action. Because if we really want the government to, or like they said, if they really wanted the government wanted to force the arm of the government to do what they want, they have to find a way to cripple, you know, several sectors. Now, what we have on the screen, Blessings, I think is what you were talking about, the several amounts of minimum wage that have been paid to Nigerian workers. In 1991, it was 250 naira. And then 2000, it increased to 5,500 naira. And then 11 years after that, it increased to 18,900. That was like my alawi in youth service, if I'm not mistaken. And then 8 years after that, 30,000 naira till present. By the way, I think it's worthy of note to state here that not all the states in the country have been paying 30,000 naira as minimum wage to their workers. You know, so it still shows how challenging, you know, this particular case has been. Education, thankfully, was not exactly affected. Particularly, I know that presently the West African Examination Council exam is ongoing, and there were fears and concerns if you know, if this strike was going to affect that. But I think WAEC eventually said that they would not want it to be affected because the examination is not just a local exam; it cuts across all West African countries. So,
from what we hear, the labor union says allegedly that they're willing to settle for 100,000 as minimum wage, and then we're also hearing that they're giving the government 1 week ultimatum. Now we're looking to see what the government is going to do within that one, and if at all they're going to, you know, concede, if that's the word, the 100. Because let's be honest, the economy is not favorable.
No, it's not.
And a lot of times we talk about average Nigerians. We do not know what these people are going through. 30,000 naira is nothing because the price of everything has literally skyrocketed. True. You can't even buy lights now. Like you literally have to, if you're earning the minimum wage at this point, you have to just focus on one thing. There's no point budgeting because it's that bad.
It is.
Yeah,
it
so
is.
when we talk about these increments, we don't know what it will do for an average person. I mean, put yourself in the shoe of someone who is having to buy a bag of rice. Even Gary, that was like, a bonus, is now luxury. So this will go a long way, no doubt. But whether or not it's going to be implemented is my challenge, right? And we're honestly hoping that the government would look into it and do something about it. The other time when we talked about revisiting the new national anthem, someone did say something that was profound. If we're going back to the old national anthem, let's go back to before fuel subsidy. Let's go back to, you know, before things became this hard. So that's what we should be considering. We've literally gone past the point where we cannot even afford to buy food. That's not a problem that the country should be facing.
Honestly speaking, for a country like Nigeria that, you know, that is an agriculture...
The giant.
I don't want to say what comes to mind for the country. So I'll quickly say this, and this is not me, putting Nigeria down. In as far back as 2012, I think, when social media wasn't as blown up, between 2012 and 2024, social media has actually grown.
It has.
Anyway, as far back as 2012, I was on this forum with a friend of mine, and it was a South African forum. A majority of the people there were South Africans. And now this, my friend, Femi, went into a battle with some of the South Africans. And what ended it was what a lady said, where are you from, Nigeria? And she said, oh, Nigeria, you're from the failed state of Africa. I wasn't on that forum. When he showed me the chart, I was hurt, right, back then. But to think about it now, between 2012 and 2024, that's 12 years, and things have even gotten worse. It is indeed painful. But now, coming to what I wanted to say earlier, I think that Labour, shouldn't just fight for an increment in their wages. I think that their fight should have gone beyond that. I think that there should have also been a fight against corruption. I know that there may be a limit to what Labour can do when it comes to fighting corruption, but there is no limit to what they can start. And that's the way I see it. So if you're going to ask for an increase and the government is saying there's no way to get this money from, take the money out of the excess of what the government officials are earning. That's my take. Yeah, this is a personal opinion, right? Because you break down, I don't know if we have that, that graph, or there were some graphics that was put side by side the minimum wage that they've been earning, starting from 1991. While you're seeing the minimum wage on one side, you're seeing the take-home of, of the senators and the top government officials. That excess on top, every year or every month, how about, if they truly are about working for the people, how about sacrifice a certain percentage that can be added to the minimum wage that can actually make things work?
It's quite easy to say that, we need to fight against corruption and all. But honestly, in my opinion, I think that this is a good start, because if we want to go into that corruption talk, right, we will fight for a long. I'm not saying it's not possible to change, but in a country where accountability is something that is alien to us, it's a challenge, because the government will have a way to explain away things. And you, as an ordinary citizen, it's like you can't. When you try to fight it, they would bring up everything in their arsenal to either, dispute your claim or make you feel like you don't know what you're saying, when the facts are literally there. Yeah. We're seeing that your take-home is a lot. Your budget for wardrobe is somebody's entire staff salary.
Somebody's annual salary.
Honestly, so it might be a tall order to say that we should start fighting corruption. It is embedded in our being, in the core of our being. So that might take, yes, to be honest, they can't start it. They can begin the revolution. But I feel like we need to focus on one thing. So even if they are corrupt, at least let us eat too. You understand?
I see that. All right, we have Adeshawa Odushoga, who's going to be joining us from our studios as well. Adeshawa, thank you for joining us. It's nice to have you on the show.
Hi, Bena. Thank you for having me. Hello, blessings.
Hi, Shawa.
And thank you for standing in for all these weeks that I've been away, by the way.
You're welcome.
Shawa, so let's talk about, the decision by the NLC. Now, let's see, with the short time that we have, decision by the NLC and the TUC to suspend the strike for at least 1 week. In your view, do you think that this was a right move? Should they have suspended it? Now they've suspended it, do you think they still have, the government in a chokehold?
In as much as I was speaking from the angle of a Nigerian, because, we all went through hell, if I can use that word, the minute they called for the strike, taking out power, taking out, everyone's just literally shutting down. But I believe that if you had done it, we've been able to endure for a day. Why not just, continue in that light instead of, stopping at a junction, then having the whole thing, scattered. If you ask me, because by now it just looks as though the government might not take them serious any longer, to say that all they need is negotiation, when we just appeal to them and then they would recall their actions and then we'll find a way to sabotage the entire process. But I also have my own reservations for the demands of the NLC. If you're going to be requesting for a minimum wage of 464,000 and above, they said that the highest they can take, right? So it means that we also need to bear in mind that that's a minimum wage. So it means that the smallest staff working for the government is about to earn almost 500,000 naira. And then we know we have to come in tandem with the reality on ground. So it means that you are going to be putting those working in the private sector that you and I am blessed. They are going to put us at a very greater risk. So it means that there's going to be a large, movement from the private sector to the public sector. Number one, we need to consider how do you expect the government to fund this minimum wage? It means that they would further widen the tax nets. And the ones that they've been doing already, we know how much people have been complaining. It's just as though the government just wants to squeeze their people's pockets from the very last kobo. So we already complaining about the excess taxation in the system. Trust me, if you force the government to pay you something more than 100,000, they are going to find every possible excuse to keep draining people and to increase their revenue. I beg your pardon. So we should just come to reality and face the reality. Ask for something realistic. If you're going to look at the economic side of it, if you're going to have a minimum wage of 400,000 naira, you're going to force inflation into the economy, which means that there's going to be excess money in circulation. People who do not have access to 100,000 naira can now boast of 400,000 naira. So instead of giving an excuse that because prices are going up, so you want to match the energy of prices going up, why not look for ways to bring the prices down and then find a way to increase the wage a bit so that you can be, at the same level and be able to afford the necessities, instead of saying that you always want to match up to the increasing level of the prices. Because what if tomorrow a bag of rice now starts to cost 400,000? Would you say the government should start paying you $1 million as minimum wage? No. So we need to go back to the drawing board and ask questions about why are we having increasing prices? So is it that the government starts to work on bringing down the price so that you can then increase the minimum wage into a bit, and then so that you can match up with the energy of to be able to afford the basic things, right? And another thing to consider is that when people try to, compare how much lawmakers are earning, of course, we know that there's a bigger corruption happening in that place. But one thing we need to consider is that the numbers of lawmakers we have, when you want to compare the numbers of lawmakers in Nigeria to the numbers of workers across Nigeria, we cannot begin to compare them. So we can also look for a way to slash the take-home for these lawmakers, bring down prices, increase minimum wage to a realistic level, and not try to ask for, exorbitant, something so ridiculous. I'm sorry, I did not say that they do not deserve to have 400,000, but we need to make requests, in tandem with the reality of our economics, right? So we know that the Nigerian economy is facing so and so. So if you really want to make people start to afford basic things, we should start to speak from the reality of things on ground. Number one, in order to avoid an artificial inflation. Number two, in order not to to cause chaos in the private sector.
Right. Okay, Adisha, by the way, I 100% buy into that idea. And I'm also going to go into, because I did mention to Bernard recently about the vaguely agreed, how would I put it, basically the vague agreement that led to the suspension of the strike. Now we're getting information that the government is allegedly proposing 105,000. We still don't know what the Congress the union is insistent on. But one thing that was very obvious was the fact that the agreement that led to the suspension of the strike was something that did not hold water, basically, because every Nigerian complained about it. You said that you were going to increase it above 60,000, and then nobody's going to be penalized for participating in the strike. Make it make sense. So do you think that the government believes at this point that the unions, the workers, everyone in labor can be swayed easily by vague agreements? Because this is not the first time. I mean, this is the first time they even opened the door, like I said earlier. Before, it was closed-door meetings. So it's always, we had a closed-door meeting. Sometimes you see one union even boycott the others, have the meeting, and then come and say, this is what we agreed on. So do you think that because of that, we have lost, credibility, or, I don't know, we have lost the power to put them in a chokehold, like Bennett said?
Also, lessons to begin to start to answer your question. I for the longest time, I don't know, I've lost a bit of trust for the labor union, if you ask me, because of series of things that we've seen happen, right? in the past. And then we've seen cases where, like you said, it's going to be a closed-door meeting. And if you try to observe from the conversations on social media, people would say, oh, all this is just initial gra-gra. Before you know it, the leader of the labor union will enter closed-door meeting, like you mentioned, and then they'll say, oh, they suspended the strike. So the entire thing was predictable because we've seen this play out before. Of course, this is the first time they're embarking on a strike for the Bola Tinubu administration. But we've seen it play out before in previous administration. So it's just as though they're fighting for their own pockets, and they do not really care less for the workers they are fighting for, to be candid. So I don't know if this particular action will make the government take them serious, and I doubt it. I mean, it's a better negotiation if you requested for 400 and then you're getting 100, even though it's very ridiculous. But like I said, if they're going to be realistic, if the government can at least pay 105,000 naira, but I'm not sure with the way things have played out in the past, the patterns of this going on strike, calling off the strike, I doubt if the government will still, take them serious, or there's a bit of credibility in the entire thing. And also we need to start to spotlight something. If you want an increment in your salary, best believe we need to start working to match the energy of how much you are earning. Because we know what plays out when you go to these ministries. When you go to secretariats or government secretariats, we see what plays out there. I mean, people literally go to secretariat and you see staff just chilling and then gisting, and then some are even selling peppers, caps, and all. A series of other business activities are going on aside the actual thing they were employed for. So, and then biggest corruption actually happens among these government workers. We need to be frank here. So there are lots of things that needs to be discussed. As much as you want to start discussing your wages, we need to also start discussing the quality of work that you put in. So
I totally agree with you.
We need to start eradicating bribery and corruption among these workers. When you want people to now fight for you in terms of your wages, we know that you're actually working for the money that you're being paid for, not just requesting money just because you want to match up to your standard of living, but you're also working because, you're also getting paid for the work that is done.
All right, Adeshewa Odushoga, thank you so much for joining us and for breaking some of this down. Before you go, Shewa, just two things I want to ask. First of all, has power been restored to your area?
Sorry?
Has power been restored to your area? We heard that the grid is now back up.
Yes, unfortunately, we got it last. I think it was just yesterday.
Same here.
Lucky you. I'm still waiting for my own to come back. There's band A, there's band B, band C, and then there's rubber band. I'm not sure which one I belong to. But finally, Shewa, you quickly talked about people having to work and earn their pay if they want to request higher. This is me asking you. You know, Michelle, do you think I'm working and I deserve more pay? I'm where I should remain where I am?
All do. Honestly, this is just stylishly tell our employers now. We all do.
Bernard deserves to be the one paying.
I can't afford the new minimum wage. But thank you so much, Shewa, for joining us. Thank you for all your contributions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll go on a quick break. When we come back, we will still be talking about, the minimum wage issue and the protest, or the strike, rather, that Labour went on. But this time, we'll be looking at it from a more economic angle. Do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you missed the first part of the show. But don't be dismayed, the second part is similar to the first part. My name again is Bernard Akede, and this is Report Desk Africa. Now, the aftermath of the strike, that's talking about the labor strike in Nigeria, cannot go unnoticed, as it significantly affected the country's economy with an estimated daily loss of hundreds of millions of naira. Now, it brought key sectors like banks, airports, and seaports to a standstill, and also disrupted crucial commercial activities. Now, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, NESG, has previously estimated that a one-day strike could cost the economy $100 million, and the just suspended strike action threatened to surpass that particular figure. News Central's Nii Omoni captured the disruption of activities due to the strike in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, and brought back this report.
Before the announcement of the suspension of the industrial action by Labour, Lagos saw a noticeable decline in activity as compared to a typical business. The streets were sparsely occupied as some youth took the opportunity to engage in sports. Private schools remained closed, marking the closure of public schools except for students sitting for the West African examinations. Operations also halted across major factories in the Ikeja Central Business District, Lagos State Commercial Hub.
We closed this gate yesterday. We carry wood, everything. There will be no work. And everywhere, 12 a.m. yesterday, they shut down the light. Up till now, we don't have light. We will take it like that until you hear our voice.
The sparseness of passengers at bus stops underscored the significant reduction in movement. Onyebuchi, a Lagos bus driver, commented on the low ridership as buses competed for the few commuters.
Since yesterday, nobody, we are just managing, buying fuel for nothing. We go same as come back without not seeing anything. You don't even make the money, we take buy fuel.
While most gas stations closed, the few that opened saw long queues.
We know if we sleep for inside our house, we know if we go from our farm. Now we come Lagos, now come on security job how they do. I get 3 children. See the can't queue what they there. My boss where they find to hype to give me. You know if you go work again because of petrol. I come out like 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. I never put anything for my belly. Since morning now, I did for free station. From this free station to other free station. What here our leader they do? What here our leader do? It's our fatherland. We fit go another country to claim that country, say our country. It's not our country. Why crazy no go day? Why thief no go day? Huh? You work now, today they give you 30,000 naira per month. You get 2 children or 2 wives. You they rent a house. You they pay water. You pay light. And then you don't see the light.
This is really, really disheartening because as a country, we are not supposed to be going through this when we have leaders.
Additionally, malls and eateries experienced diminished patronage as most hospitals continued operations.
For example, the hospital I'm visiting here now with my family, they are attending to us. No doctor is absent.
The recent resolution to temporarily suspend the strike for 1 week may gradually return processes to normal. However, questions remain as to whether these measures will ultimately yield positive outcomes, especially for those who have endured consequences like a total nationwide power blackout. In Lagos for News Central, Ni Omani.
I couldn't but look at the energy that gentleman there in that report you were speaking with, you know, how difficult things have been, how expensive things have been. Added to that problem, people still had to source for petrol, you know, and pay even more than the actual price. Now, joining us, we are now joined by News Central's digital news editor and research team lead, Abdulateef Ahmed. Abdulateef, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I honestly called him Abdulateef just before, before we went on. Abdulateef. But thank you so much for joining us, Abdulateef.
Thank you.
Okay, so Abdul, as I like to call you, what do you think, or how do you think this, you know, this affected Nigeria's economy during this particular period for these 2 days?
Okay, so basically, every time there is a strike action, there is a lot that goes on in terms of losses for, one, the ordinary Nigerian who doesn't understand wages and all of that. He earns his living on the hour. He earns his living by going out, you know, to, you know, sell products, engage with people, customers, consumers, as the case may be. Say, the woman who sells at the end of the street. That is at the lower level. Then on a larger scale, the entire value chain of production, you know, factories and all of that are affected because, again, there's a target that is expected to be met on a daily basis that is not met. And so once that happens, what it means is that there will be a lot of losses. So we experienced losses in terms of transportation sector, telecommunication sector, the factories, name it. Nearly every sector of Nigeria was affected, was negatively impacted by, you know, the strike.
So looking at the cost of living, the rising cost of living, would we say that it's justified that they're demanding for more? And would we say that it's justified that they're demanding for that much?
Absolutely, it is. Because, you see, what a lot of Nigerians are not considering is the fact that inflationary pressure has impacted the currency so much that what you could afford for like 100,000 now, 5 years ago, you cannot afford that, you know, at the moment. So it means that something has to happen to your currency. Your purchasing power, you know, has to increase. That is one. Two, there's rising cost of living. Yeah. So you cannot pay someone the same amount of money you've been paying that person, say 5 years ago, because the last time we had adjustments on salaries was in 2019. And 2019 came after a long while, I think 2011.
2011, yeah.
You know, so people have stayed through a lot of pain, stress, and all that. And then so it makes a lot of sense that they are making this demand. However, you do not expect that a government gets into power and everything changes overnight. It has to study the situation, adjust a lot of things to be able to contain, adjustments for salaries, and as the case may be. So because it's not just about the minimum wage, there's going to be, you know, an incremental amount, commensurate amount to all of those who are above the minimum wage. So yes, you're paying from 100, as was proposed. In any case, what you have means that if we agree on a minimum wage, the private sector cannot pay less than that. Anybody paying less than that will be violating the laws. So again, pressure on private sector.
That's another huge challenge. Now, look, I'm casting my mind back to secondary school here, economics, O-level economics.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a brilliant student in secondary school. So, you know, and you know, we're told that when it comes to government workers, when they try to force the arm of the government to yield to their demands, strike actions are supposed to be the last resort. But we've seen in several years past that strike action is the only resort that they have. So immediately something goes wrong, that's the first thing they jump at. Haven't forgotten that there are economic consequences, right? So I just want to ask you, what do you think, and you know, we seem to forget the economic consequences sometimes when you jump at. What do you think are the economic consequences of these strike actions, and how do you think they affect us as Nigerians?
There are several economic consequences. One, people will spend more because for the days that they did not work, it is a vacuum that must be filled. So, for instance, if you know, for those who earn by the hour, if you calculate what it means for you to have not worked for 8 or 10 hours, as the case may be, you'll be asking yourself, where else will I get this? But again, they said, no pay, no gain. When you have to sacrifice those little times to be off work, it may mean that you are fighting for your future. Now, the problem here is that when you talk about consequences, there are people whose life depends on workers. So we are not looking at people shutting down the power grid, because there are patients in the hospital who rely on power. So when you're messing up with the power, it means that hospitals will be left with no option than to say, you know what, at this point, I give up. I mean, doctors are not gods, so they cannot produce electricity. They are there to give, you know, medical attention to patients. The consequence is that people will die for nothing. You can actually have industrial actions that does not mean that you're shutting down the entire economy. It means that you can press home your demands without touching the most critical. Okay, I mean, if media outlets refuse to broadcast because they are also joining the strike actions, for example, and those who are supplying the internet service providers decide to say, you know what, we're also going on strike, it means we're going to be in a total blackout.
Yeah.
The entire world will be moving, and for the entire hours that the strike is on, we will not know jack. And it is very problematic because, I mean, flights were even disrupted. People who were supposed to be airlifted for Hajj, for example, could not go because the strike didn't allow the planes to land. So the cost of flying those flights all the way from Mecca to Nigeria and then returning, lose pockets.
Yeah, true.
So the implication is far-reaching.
So the problem here is, I mean, a lot of people would argue, like Bernard said, that over the years, the only way that we know to force the arm of the government is to go on strike. Because several times we hear that even financial advisors are appointed and then seemingly boycotted because, like, it's like there's just the autonomy of decision in the country. If you look at the recent strike action that was embarked on, a lot of people were actually in support of the union because people are of the idea that, you know what, we'd rather suffer this for like 1 week so that we know that we have a resolution as opposed to just, you know, having a up and down this thing and then they don't come to a conclusion. So what would you say that the stance of the people are in this regard? Like, do you think that people are in support, and why do you think they are?
So yes, this particular strike action got a general, you know, agreement, consensus across the country, because there are very evident indicators that people are going through a lot, as the quote may be. But what people are not looking at is that increments in salaries are not done, you know, at random. It doesn't, I mean, I gave you that example. After 2011, the next increment we had was in 2019. That is about 8 years. If we assume that another increment will happen in the next 4 years or 8 years, one, imagine what will happen if the cost of fuel, as we buy it now, triples or quadruples. Imagine what it will cost if the cost of food, if it affects the entire thing. You cannot go back to government and say, you know what, we want increment in salaries. Again, what will happen is that when you increase salaries without taking certain indicators into consideration, there will be inflation, which will affect every other sector. Then you'll be back to square one. So what we should be more focused on are two things. More productivity across states. States are extremely lazy. In Nigeria, you see states blaming the federal government, and we say states are in control of lands and other resources. Yeah. What is happening at state level? That's one. Two, you should also consider the fact that after the increment, those who will need to implement this salary increases are aware that those in power, for example, senators, do not need to go on strike before they increase their own salaries by fiat or whatever. So we should be mindful. Yes, we are agreeing to go on strike, but we should be mindful of inflationary pressure from just having increased salaries and also the impact it has on the private sector.
All right, Abdul Lateef, Ahmed, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you, and you always find a way to break down. I think at this point we should vote you as NLC president. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
We'll go on a very, very quick break now. When we come back, we'll be running through our crystal ball for the things that we'll be looking towards in the coming week. I've almost lost my grip on the show. It's been so long I've been here.
All right, very quickly, looking into our crystal ball now, we are expecting a developing story from South Africa where the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, met with senior officials of the African National Congress to form a government after the party lost its 30-year grip on power. Now, the party's National Executive Committee met in Johannesburg to work through a split within the party's ranks, indicating a plan to build a government of national unity.
And from there now we go to Burkina Faso, where Russia's foreign minister has pledged more support to Burkina Faso in fighting militant groups. The country, which has gone through 2 coups in just 10 months, now struggles to contain the security and humanitarian crisis within.
All right, still on the forecast, the paramilitary group fighting the army, the Rapid Support Forces, has been blamed for the massacre of at least 150 people in a village in central Sudan. Sudan's military government has called for international condemnation of the Wad al-Noura attack.
And that's as much we can take on today's episode of Report Desk Africa. Quite a rainy day. And it's always good to be back. Blessings, I know your plot. I've been told that you are the one trying to keep me away from the show.
Is it not
I will
working?
strike for you.
Is it not working?
It's working, but I'm going to go on strike because of this.
I mean, it's courtesy to just say that we missed you on the show. It's not like I really did, but it's good to have you back on the show. I know that you take off again next week, but it's been a good episode.
Yes, it has. Thank you so much for watching Report Desk Africa today. My name is Bernard Akede, and this has been a fantastic episode.
I'm Blessings Masugo. Have a lovely day.